And then second, I'm going to let you share.
I forgot how to do all that. But anyway.
Right, on the bottom.
Okay.
Bottom, you have a green.
Right, right. I see. Okay, so share. And how do I forgot, where do I go to present? I forgot, where is that? Anybody remember?
Share screen.
Yeah, and
Bottom
then
center.
There's a present button on the top right next to the share. Yeah, someone already said share, sorry.
yeah, new share, and then there is a, I already did that.
Oh, okay. We're seeing your screen. We're
Right,
seeing
you see
the
it, yeah, but how do I present? Where do I go to present?
What do you mean present?
Present, it means it makes it larger.
You see
There's a present button to the left of the yellow share button on the top right of your screen. There's a share button, and then there you go, yeah.
Oh, you see it was covered. So there is a share button and there is a present. Okay, it was covered by the, you know, those things. Okay, I'm gonna make it smaller here. All right. Okay. Oh, I forgot now how do I go back? I forgot to go like this. Okay. All right. Yeah. Here you see the most famous phrase, most famous quote of Socrates. So the way we're gonna do it is I'm gonna give a short introduction to Socrates and a little bit Plato and Athens of those days, and then we're gonna go. I selected some quotes from the book, and we're gonna read them and I give a little additional information, and we'll discuss each one of them. So, well, in general, obviously, we know that philosophy is the Greek invention in a way. We call it, it's a love of wisdom. And this particular dialogue is Apologia, which actually means defense. So it's a defense speech after the accusation. So Socrates basically brings like a new stage in the Greek philosophy because a lot of pre-Socratic Milesian school of Thales, one of the earliest. The Milesian school, Miletus, is from Ionia in Asia Minor. So by the way, I just want to make a disclaimer. I'm just a history buff. I'm not a professional. So my knowledge is limited, obviously. So Milesian schools of Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes, and also the another Ionian, famous Ionian, Anaxagoras, that actually happened to be from Glasimene, which is in Ionia, but he moved to Athens and lived and was a friend of Pericles at the time. So they were all naturalists of what we would call nowadays scientists. You know, there was no difference between, you know, philosophy as we understand it right now and science. So they were all basically investigating, you know, the basis of physical world. You know, had all kinds of ideas, very interesting. You know, one of the philosophers, Heraclitus, which is a contemporary of Socrates, had this atomic theory, very interesting. Um, but Socrates really was investigating the ethical issues and what it means to lead a good life. I mean, that's basically, and he draws the distinction in his dialogue between naturalists. He actually mentioned Anaxagoras by name, uh, and himself. And also he draws the distinction between another direction, what's called sophists, specifically those who were teaching in Athens at the time, Gorgias and Protagoras. and Sophists were basically were teaching the rhetorics and power of argument. And again, there are some quotes there. We will refer to them. So now, Socrates was born in 470 BCE and died in 399. Was the execution. So he was 70 years old at the time. He was born in parts of the Athens called Alopeke and belonged to the tribes of Antiochus. So if you remember, Cleisthenes divided Athenian society and what we call Athenian democracy into the 10 tribes. So it was one of the tribes. So his father was Sophronicus. He was a sculptor or stonemason, from what we know. And his mother was a midwife named Phanarete. And he only got married to his infamous wife, Xantippe, in his 50s, pretty late. And Xantippe was notorious for having an undesirable temperament. And we know a number of references with regards that he was made. She bore him 3 sons. And Xenophon reports, who is also a contemporary, wrote in that time, he reports that because the youth were not allowed to enter Agora, you're not, until you're 20 years old, you're not even considered full citizen, you can't vote, you can't even enter Agora. So they usually gathered in the workshop surrounding the Agora, and that was frequented by Socrates, who engaged a lot of people into conversations. You know, a lot of people followed them. He talked to merchants, all kinds of people. That was his way of life. You know, most notable of those people is Simon the shoemaker. He is talked about in a couple of dialogues. So Socrates served in the army. He fulfilled his role as a hoplite, participated in Peloponnesian War, I believe like in 3 major battles. When Peloponnesian War was, when the Athens were defeated in the Peloponnesian War in 404 BC, the Spartans decided that it's worth maintaining Athens as a power to balance the forces in Greece, and they established the tyranny of 30. And the leader of the tyranny of 30 was Critias, who was actually a pupil of a follower of Socrates. This tyranny lasted only 8 months, and then it was overthrown, and democracy was restored. However, because of Critias and a couple of others of the 30 were pupils of Socrates, he obviously was considered to be a hostile element. People didn't like him because they thought he is not supporting democracy, and actually he have expressed a few views that he was not known to be anti-democratic, similar to Plato as well, so one of the views was that he expressed openly that the most prominent, that the most important decisions were not decided by the majority opinion that yields, the majority of opinion doesn't usually yield correct policy. It usually, you need a genuine knowledge and professional competence to make this. Only a few people possess that. So that's why, I mean, similar to what Plato's view that philosopher king would be the greater leader than, greater structure than a democracy. So he was charged with the impiety, which is called asabia, against the pantheon of Athens, which is pantheon of gods, and corruption of the youth of the city-state. And accusers cited two impious acts by Socrates: failing to acknowledge the gods that the city acknowledges, and introducing new deities. That's the. And as you know, he was condemned to death by forced poisoning, drinking the hemlock, uh, which is a poisonous grass. Uh, um, that's a little bit about Socrates. Now, this is Plato. So Plato, who wrote all the dialogues, is the major source. I would say probably 75 to 80% information we have about Socrates comes from Plato, and maybe another 10, 15 is from Xenophon, and very few other percentages is from a few others. So Plato was born, unfortunately, we don't have exact date. It's either 428 or 423. So he was born in that time. So he was definitely, Socrates was at least his 40 years senior. And he died in 348 or 347, also lived very long life. He belonged to aristocratic and influential family of Athens. His father, Ariston, traced the descent from king of Athens, Codrus, and his mother, Perictonia, had a relationship or was descendant of the famous lawmaker and lyric poet Solon, who actually was one of the seven sages. Um, so I don't want to go too much, but Solon is famously known to replacing the laws of Draco and actually created in a way the first version of the Athenian democracy. Um, Short-lived though, but so it is Plato who is credited with being a founder of the Western intellectual tradition. In the academy that Plato created, the school, he taught Aristotle, and Aristotle works formed the basis of what is now called the scientific method. Now, a little bit about Athens. So before the Peloponnesian War that started 431, population of Athens was estimated about 250 to 300,000 people, which is a very big city by those standards. Only adult males over 20 years could vote, with the total number of them was estimated between 30 and 50,000. So these are the only full citizens. So at times, the opinions of voters could be strongly influenced by political satire of the comic poets, such as Aristophanes, and he's also mentioned in this dialogue. The quorum for taking a vote was 6,000 votes. So if 6,000 citizens present in Agora, the vote could be taken. And so women, foreigners, children, slaves were not full citizens, couldn't vote, hold a public office, and they had to have an adult male act as a guardian of their property and other interests. So Athens had a very elaborate legal system, and it's important to understand this legal system because it has a lot to do with this dialogue to really understand how it flows. So the jurors, they could be up to usually selected 6,000 jurors every day, or maybe for a period of time. The average size of jury is about 501, and that's we believe that scientists believe that that's the jury that was present at trial of Socrates. So the cases were put by the litigant themselves in the form of exchange of single speeches, limited by water clock up to 3 hours each. First, one or few prosecutors would make their speech, then the defendant. They were all private citizens. They could hire sophists to present their cases because they're usually more eloquent, would make it stronger. There were no lawyers or judges. Jurors were assigned at the day of the trial. That's to avoid the bribery. So you don't know who would be a jury. So there is no way to bribe the jury ahead of time. So decisions were made by voting without any time set for deliberation. However, during the trial, jurors did express their opinion openly. They could be shouting, it could be pretty rowdy. They could be shouting disapproval or disbelief. That usually by the time everything is finished, the jurors were asked to vote and they would vote. Uh, so the jury could only vote yes or no as to the guilty or not guilty. Then, if the defendant found guilty, then there was the next stage, and that's actually presented in this. Then the prosecutor, the guy accuser, would suggest the punishment. The jury could not choose the punishment at all. The prosecutor would suggest the punishment, and then defendant would suggest the punishment. And the jury could only vote on one or the other. So that would force the both parties to suggest something reasonable, not too extreme, one way or the other, because otherwise you risk that the jury would pick the opposite punishment. So now the justice was very rapid. The case could not last longer than one day. It usually completed by the sunset. There were no adjournment. So very, very interesting. So this is all described in the Athenian constitution by Aristotle. All right. So now we have, so this is the first fragment. And I hope that you don't mind if I'll ask somebody to read this. I don't know what happened here. Something. Do I have? Okay. All right. I will read the first one, and then we'll discuss it, and then maybe somebody else will read a few others. Okay. So this is the first one. Well, then I must make a defense, men of Athens, and must try in so short a time to remove from you this prejudice which you have been for so long at a time acquiring. Meletus, this is the main accuser, trusted when he brought the suit against me. What did those who aroused the prejudice say to rouse it? I must, as it were, read their sworn statement as if they were plaintiffs. Socrates is a criminal and a busybody investigating the things beneath the earth and in the heavens and making the weaker arguments stronger and teaching others these same things. Something of that sort it is. For you yourself saw these things in Aristophanes' comedy. So you see here, he is mentioning Aristophanes himself. It basically refers to many years that people there was a slander against him, and a number of youth were actually educated in this prejudice against him. And also, I just wanted to mention that he mentions here that that he is investigating the things beneath the earth and in the heavens. This is the reference to naturalists. the ones that I mentioned, the previous, and most notably um, Aristogoras. And then he's saying, and making the weaker argument stronger. And this he is referring to the sophists like Gorgas and Protagoras, who actually taught rhetoric and taught that they could argue either way, in the prosecution or defense, and taught people how to do this. So these are the main things. Okay, now I'm going to make a little interruption here and see if anyone else wants to add anything, have questions. Please go ahead.
Well, my takeaway from this is it almost feels like he's giving himself up for it. You can say it injustice or justice, just so that he can die as a martyr, basically, in that regard. Would you agree that that's the fact? Is that what he's trying to do? He is trying to raise an awareness in some respect. Greg.
Well, eventually, yes, he kind of defies the jury, but that's we could see this towards the end. I mean, he just like presents his case and builds his own argument about that they're mistaken, that they take him for someone else, that he's not a naturalist, he's not investigating the things, the nature of the universe, and he is not the sophist who makes weak arguments stronger. He's basically, as he's going to talk later, he's teaching ethics.
Right. We have George Gonzalez want to ask a question. George, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you very much. It seems to me a couple of things, from this quote. Firstly, as I understand it, what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, he's rejecting the naturalist, right? He's in essence invoking questions, I would submit, of philosophy, more broadly understood. He is speculating as to the nature of the universe. He's speculating what the truth is. He's allowing his thinking to go wherever he thinks the truth takes him. Again, he's thinking big. And, one of the things that comes to my mind is that he's replicating the continental analytic philosophy debate, which is that, analytic philosophers, they will claim that they are basically operating with the physical sciences. The other reality is that, and this actually this is a critique that I make of the analytic philosophers, which is that his enemies are trying to limit his inquiry, right? They want to limit it to, okay, things that we can touch and feel, and let's think about this and that, the river moving and the tree and this and that. Let's not think about the big questions. Let's not think about what's truth, what's the just society, right? Because this is what he's speculating on. And so in the end, my read of it is that this is why he gets killed or executed, because, right, he's challenging the theocracy of the time, right? And one way of looking at it is that the big questions of Athenian philosophy at the time were officially being answered by theology, right? So it's the gods, right, that explain the broader movement of the world. And it's the gods that know justice. It's the gods that tell us justice, right? We are not supposed to speculate on that, right? And so this is what he's doing. He's opening his mind, and he is letting it go to wherever he thinks it should go. And of course, he is pursuing justice, right? And so his crimes, my point, are twofold. One is he's not limiting his philosophical musings to what the analytic philosophers of the time are saying. So a lot of times when you talk to analytic philosophers, they basically are not really interested in questions of justice. And they'll say, oh, that's for somebody else, right? And or alternatively, one day we'll figure that out, but right now we can't, so let's not talk about it. Or if you do talk about it, you're talking about theology, or you're talking about astronomy, so the issue insults, right? So I think, again, on the one hand, I think Socrates is running up against the philosophers of his day, as I understand this, and on the other hand, he's running up also against the theology and the political establishment. and it's you, and this notion that, okay, it's the gods that deliver justice. You're not supposed to think about justice. Again, those are my thoughts. I hope they're helpful.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, he doesn't reject naturalists. He's just saying that he is not one of them. That he's not, his area of investigation has nothing to do with the physical world and how the world consists. Go ahead, George.
Well, my point is that that's exactly what happens, right? The continental philosopher will say, yeah, you know, we have no problem with empiricism. We have no problem with science, but we should not limit our inquiry to that, right? In essence, you know, it's like sometimes you feel, again, I'm just sort of bringing this into contemporary debates as I understand them. Sometimes you're listening to these analytic philosophers and you're like, well, you know, what contribution are you making, right? I mean, the neurologist, right, is telling you this, you're just recounting that, right? Where's the philosophical inquiry? So my point is that I'm not saying that Socrates is rejecting the naturalists. My point is that the naturalists want to limit the debate to that, right? They're the ones, it seems to me, that want to say, oh, we only want to talk about naturalism, right? Politics is dangerous. Questions of justice are dangerous. Leave that to the state, leave that to the gods.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else wants to add anything?
Yeah, I think, can anybody, can you hear me?
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah,
Oh, Paul,
How are
by
you
the way,
feeling, man? I'm glad you're here. I cannot believe it.
yeah. I'm feeling pretty good, or I wouldn't be here.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. Go
Good.
ahead.
just to give everybody a synopsis, Paul had a surgery today. And
It's
Yesterday.
okay. We don't have to talk about it.
no, but he loves this group so much that thank you. We appreciate definitely.
Well, I'm bored to tears sitting here, so you know, you guys keep me mentally alive.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to say about this is that there's a political context. Now, if you guys have already talked about it, tell me, and I'll stop now because I missed the beginning of the presentation. So, you know, Athens has been gyrating wildly around the time that Socrates was convicted between oligarchic factions that conducted a reign of terror. We're talking about what was called the 30. That when the Athenians lost the Peloponnesian War, the Spartans came in and created a regime called the 30, which was led by.
I'm sorry. We did talk about this. I gave introduction about the tyranny of 30 and Critias and
Okay.
And, yeah. Sorry, Paul, but
And that a number of these people were pupils of Socrates.
yeah.
Right, Critias was a pupil. Sure. Xenophon, who was a pupil, was very likely a supporter of this faction, since he later, chose Sparta over Athens. So there's this so Plato wants to put it in philosophical terms because that's what he's doing. He's a philosopher writing after the fact. I mean, never forget that Plato is writing this, not Socrates.
Sure.
And so in terms of the actual history, I think that this had an awful lot to do with the fact that they thought that, that the Democrats had been reinstated and they were looking for payback.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anybody else wants to add to specifically this, or we could go to the next segment?
Well, I might add, I agree with Greg that basically he is accused of dealing with the natural sciences, dealing with the heavens and what's underground. But he's saying, no, that accusation is simply false. So this article doesn't really address in any way this question. He was accused of it, and he said, no, this has nothing to do with that. This is about morality. So I don't think the question of the natural sciences really enters into this debate, this trial at all.
Yeah, even though he is accused of doing this. Anyway, so the next segment, Ralph, would you mind reading it? Is it big enough?
Okay, yeah, sure. Caravan, you know Caravan, I fancy. Just a second. He was my comrade from youth and the comrade of your Democratic Party. and shared in the recent exile and came back with you. Well, once he went to Delphi and made so bold as to ask the oracle this question. And gentlemen, don't make a disturbance at what I say, for he asked if there were anyone wiser than I. Now the Pithier replied that there was no one wiser. And about these things, his brother here will bear you witness, since Caravan is dead.
So just a little info that Caravan was a known Democrat and actually suffered from the tyranny of 30 and was exiled. He ran away and then came back. When democracy was restored, was a prominent figure. He came back in 4003 BC. And he died sometime before the trial, but he actually wanted to show that he not only had friends among those 30, but also among the Democrats. That had nothing to do with anything here. And again, this is the beginning of the big discussion about the oracle that we're going to actually read more about later on. Anyone wants to add anything here? Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. That's a big one. I hope it's big enough. So anyone wants to read it? Could I ask someone to read it?
I'll read.
Okay.
And for a long time was at a loss as to what he meant. Then, with a great reluctance, I proceeded to investigate him somewhat as follows. I went to one of those who had a reputation for wisdom, thinking that there, if anywhere, I should prove the utterance wrong and should show the oracle. This man is wiser than I, but you said I was wisest. This man seemed to me to be wise to many other people, and especially to himself, but not to be so. And then I tried to show him that he thought he was wise, but was not. As a result, I became hateful to him and to many of those present. And so, as I went away, I thought to myself, I'm wiser than this man, for neither of us really knows anything fine and good. But this man thinks he knows something when he does not. Whereas I, as I do not know anything, do not think I do either. From him I went to another of those who were reputed to be wiser than he. And this same thing seemed to me to be true. And there I became hateful both to him and to many others.
Okay, so by the way, some of the historians and philosophers believe that the first person he refers to is as a politician is actually a Pericles. Well, it's not 100% certain, but a lot of philosophers have this opinion. And here he is basically presents here the major tenet of his philosophy, that in order to learn, one must admit ignorance. True wisdom is an understanding of how little you know and how much you have still to learn. So that's basically what he's trying to present here.
It seems to me that that's a little ingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yes, he takes that pose that yes, I am ignorant, I know nothing, and at least I know that I know nothing. But then you read his dialogues, and you know he guides people through to certain conclusions. You know, with great confidence. You know, he has ideas of what the good is and what the beautiful is, and so I think he's, you know, I think that is not in the same spirit as what he says here. I think he's contradicting himself.
I would agree with Paul. I think this is slightly satirical. He's not really answering the charges at all. He's really kind of criticizing his critics. he's saying, well, everybody else, all of these other supposedly wise people, which presumably include his critics, they think they're so smart and they're not. So he's just making fun of his critics, but not really answering the charges at all. Thanks.
George.
And that's probably what brought him in the trouble in the first place. And then he continues doing the same thing. So he basically increases hatefulness of him by these people, by jurors.
Right.
Though the result was still almost in his favor, but just almost.
Yes, actually, yeah, go ahead. There is more of this.
If I could say,
Go ahead. I just wanted to show representation while we talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I think that Socrates is saying, of course, that when we do philosophize, we have to be exercise humility, be conservative and cautious in the way we think. But at the same time, what he's also saying is that we should be free to philosophize openly and freely, that we should be free to openly discuss justice, that we should be free to openly discuss beauty, and that, again, we do so with a sense of humility and caution and thoughtfulness, and we approach the process in a full faith manner, but that humans have the power to speculate, and we should be speculating. And of course, the implication is this is the only way to really exercise democracy, to allow people to freely speculate in a full faith manner. And it's really, again, I submit that it's really on this altar that he's executed.
Okay. All right. This is the representation of this trial. One of the representations, as people imagine this to be. I mean, who knows? And there is more continuation. And George, do you mind reading this part? It's just continuation of the same thing, but I thought it was. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I will be more than happy to read if I could see the entire text.
Oh, you can't see it?
I don't see the big. For some reason, for me on the left, I don't see the margin is cut off at the left. But again, I'll be happy to read.
Okay. It's okay. No problem. Okay. You know what? I will read this one.
Greg, I can read it.
Okay, go ahead.
For after the politicians, I went to the poets, those of tragedies and those of dithyrambs and the rest, thinking that there I should prove by actual test that I was less learned than they. So taking up the poems of theirs that seemed to me to have been the most carefully elaborated by them, I asked them what they meant, that I might at the same time learn something from them. Now I am ashamed to tell you the truth, gentlemen, but it still must be told, for there was hardly a man present, one might say, who would not speak better than they about the poems they themselves had composed. So again, in the case of the poets, also I presently recognize this, that it was not by wisdom that they composed what they composed, but imagination. And because they were inspired like the prophets and givers of oracles. For these also say many fine things, but know none of the things they say. It was evident to me that the poets too had experienced something of the same sort. And at the same time, I perceived that they, on account of their poetry, thought that they were the wisest of men in the world, wisest men in other things as well, in which they were not. So I went away from them also, thinking that I was superior to them in the same thing in which I excelled politicians.
So,
let me just get a quick comment on this.
Go ahead, of course.
As I was reading, it reminded me of interviews with Bob Dylan, who was very clear about the fact that he has no idea how he writes his songs, and that he's kind of possessed. And lots of songwriters have basically said, I don't know how I write this. It's not me at all. Some force puts it in my mind and I get it out and I can't help myself, and it has nothing to do with me and my personality.
Okay. So really, this is like a second thing, because basically what he's saying, first he went to politicians, talked to them, found out they don't know what they're talking about. Then he went to the poets, this another very respected group, and learned that they also don't know what they're writing about, and obviously a lot of them, like Aristophanes, made a lot of accusations against him, slander, I would say. And then there is another one which I didn't include. He also went to the merchants and artisans and found out again that they don't know what they're talking about. So I guess he's not winning hearts of the jury here, you know, and it's apparently not even his process. So
Yeah, I
one of
mean,
the
he's
yeah.
sticking his thumb in their eye.
Right, right. So one of the comparison I read about that I found very, you know, appropriate. It's like he would go to the St. Peter's Cathedral in Vatican and declare that Pope knows nothing about religion. Something similar to this. So anyone who wants to?
But let me just say that at the same time, he has this insight about the nature of inspiration that I think is quite, you know, it's quite a real insight.
Okay.
George had raised the hand again. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think my read of it, I think, well, my read of it is that he's claiming that no one has a monopoly on the question of justice or on the issues of philosophy, broadly speaking, right? And so, I mean, it is the obligation of the philosopher to basically try to train people, to help them think about philosophical questions. But anybody can philosophize. Anybody can speculate about justice or, you know, about various philosophical questions. And it should be noted, you know, that Socrates, of course, he comes to us through the Enlightenment, 17th, 18th centuries, maybe before that, where the scholars started to look at Socrates, they started to look at the ancient Greeks. And this, of course, is subversive, right? Because in that period, the thought is that, yes, that the church has a monopoly on knowledge, on what is justice, or the king has a monopoly, or the aristocracy has a monopoly. So, you know, again, what Socrates is saying, again, he is being subversive in his argument. And in a way, I don't think he's really sticking his nose in their eye or anything like that. I think he's, you know, I think he is not he's not pleading for his life, right? Instead, he's going down fighting. He's going down fighting, right? And this is what makes Socrates such an admirable figure, in that he is willing to die for the truth. And the truth is that we are all capable of philosophizing about questions of justice, right? He, in a sense, is arguing for the democratization of justice, for the democratization of philosophy. And so in this way, again, this is what makes Socrates such an admirable figure and what drew classicists, or ultimately became classicists, to him in the 17th and 18th centuries.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else would like to make a comment or have a question?
I think that he knows that there is no justice in this trial, so he wants to to explain all his philosophy, his ideas, but he knows that he's going to be, regardless of what he said, he's going to be found guilty. That's number one. And number two, I think, I think that's the main thing.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one. Okay. James, would you read it? Can you see it? You're muted.
I also have a piece cut off, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize. Okay. All right. So
I can read it, Greg.
thank you, Tad. Go ahead.
He says I'm a wrongdoer because I corrupt the youth, but I, men of Athens, say Miletus is a wrongdoer because he jokes in earnest, lightly involving people in a lawsuit, pretending to be zealous and concerned about things for which he never cared at all. And that this is so, I will try to make plain to you also. But Miletus, those in the ecclesia, don't corrupt the youth, do they? Or do they also all make them better? They also? All the Athenians then, as it seems, make them excellent, except myself, and I alone corrupt them. Is this what you mean? Very decidedly, this is what I mean. But answer me, does it seem to you to be so in the case of horses, that those who make them better are all mankind, and he who injures them some one person, or quite the opposite of this, that he who is able to make them better is some one person, or very few, the horse trainers, whereas most people, if they have to do with and use horses, injure them.
Okay, so this is like a pretty interesting argument that he makes. Him. First of all, in the first paragraph, he basically accusing Meletus of sycophancy. So one of the laws in Athens is that if you make a case, if you accuse someone, and you fail to gather at least 1/5 of the jurors, you're paying a huge sum of 1,000 drachmas penalty. So, and this is called sycophant. So he is basically making the case that he is that this is frivolous suit. So that's he's trying all kinds of tricks, all kinds of defenses here, and we'll see what's going to happen later. But the second part, it's a very interesting argument. So he basically implies that it's usually a few people who do good, but many do injury in ignorance, because people in general ignorant about various things, and a very few people really have enough of knowledge and competence to do good in certain areas, but the majority, due to the ignorance, don't. So to corrupt someone, then he also is talking about the I don't know, it may be coming later, but maybe I just omitted the some. But he also asking is whether he is corrupting someone voluntarily, or not, and makes so that argument that eventually shows that he's not voluntary. If they consider it corruption, it's not voluntary, and therefore he's not supposed to be prosecuted. So a lot of interesting, but this example with a horse, he basically shows that those people who they say that he's doing injury, but he's trying to say no, he's not. Well, anyway, anyone wants to?
George has a raised question. Go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you. I think that the claim of corrupting the youth is a very, very fascinating one. Because in the end, I believe what's being argued here is that, Socrates is undoing or challenging the indoctrination of the youth, right? He's teaching them critical thought. He's encouraging them to question, right? The state, their elders, right? And so, that in and of itself is, to me, a very fascinating kind of claim that, again, he's corrupting the youth because he's teaching them, again, to speculate broadly. He's teaching them not to accept what the elders say or what the state says, right? And that's a very fascinating issue in and of itself. What I'll say as a brief aside, and not to get too into this, but there is, I write a lot about Star Trek. There's a very interesting reference to this in Star Trek, whereby Worf discovers a camp of Romulans and Klingons living together. Klingons and Romulans living together, and so what he does, he goes there, and he's accused of corrupting the youth, and he's going to be executed because he's corrupting the youth. Now, what he's doing is basically the opposite of Socrates, I would submit, because in that case, what he's teaching in the end is that Romulans and Klingons should not live together in harmony. That's when he goes and says, oh, these Klingons are living in harmony with the Romulans. This is what your elders have told you. This is false. Klingons should not be living in harmony with Romulans. But again, he is about to be executed for corrupting the youth. So I just wanted to interject that sort of interesting parallel just very quickly. Amusing in my mind.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would just once again point to the hand of Plato. If we look at Meletus's responses, they also very decidedly, this is what I mean. In other words, yes, Socrates. Yes, Socrates. Now, to his from his arch opponent here, that's absurd. That's Plato making some point with and abandoning the idea that this is really a argument or a discussion between real people. Miletus would never have responded like this.
Okay. Anyone has something else to say? Okay, let's move to the next one. So, okay, who else can I ask to read? Who else would be willing to read? I don't know. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. And I know some people don't have.
Rashad or Marika?
I cannot read. Well, I don't see that you change it, number one, but also I cannot see the whole thing.
Okay, yeah, okay, no
I
problem.
mean, I don't know why. For me,
It's
it's
okay.
very
Don't worry about it. Okay, you know what? I'll read this one. But nevertheless, tell us, how do you say, Miletus, that I corrupt the youth? Or is it evidence, according to the indictment you brought, that it is by teaching them not to believe in the gods the state believes in, but in the other new spiritual things, beings? Do you not say that it is by teaching this that I corrupt them? That these, however, are not the gods whom the state believes in, but others. And this is what you accuse me for, that I believe in others. Or you say that I do not myself believe in gods at all, and that I teach this unbelief to other people. That is what I say, that you do not believe in gods at all. You amaze me, Miletus. Why do you say this? Do I not even believe that the sun or yet the moon are gods, as the rest of the mankind do? No, by Zeus, judges. Since he says that the sun is a stone and the moon earth, do you think you are accusing Anaxagoras, my dear Miletus? And do so despise these gentlemen and think they are so unversed in letters as not to know that the books of Anaxagoras of Glucksomene are full of such utterances? So this is again, he returns in saying that what he accused him of is more could be related to Anaxagoras and his books. Unfortunately, none of his books survive nowadays. However, there are other sources that make quotes and summaries of those books. And he basically, again, separates himself. Anaxagoras is dead by this time. He separates himself from naturalists or scientists, that Anaxagoras was one of them. And he's basically telling them that everybody knows that he is interested not in physical world, but rather the questions concerning the good life, notions like justice, pity, virtue, knowledge. So it's kind of like ethical issues. And by the way, this is where the philosophy begins to split, because prior to this, those naturalists, they also thought, investigated some ethical questions. But here, he is a pure, he is a pure philosopher. He is only interested in questions of ethics and not in science, not in natural. By the way, you know that all the sciences, even up to 19th century, were called in general natural philosophy. This kind of state that there is philosophy was split into natural philosophy and philosophy. So he's now shows that he is not in the camp of natural philosophers. So he basically, so what we know, Socrates investigates these questions of how you should live and what priorities you should have in your life. And he basically, through Plato, he gives an answer to this. And his answer that the way to the priorities to life is not to amass wealth and power, but caring for one's soul by honoring justice above all else. The way to do it is to examining yourself and others, and that's what he calls is practicing philosophy. So he is a proponent of practicing philosophy, which is examining yourself and others. That's the famous phrase that comes later on. The unexamined life is not worth living. You know, that's basically he's trying to distinguish himself, that you confusing him with someone and all of these utterances about the sun and the moon. No, he does believe in God. He's not an atheist. And none of the philosophers, by the way, of those days, even natural philosophers, are necessarily atheists. They still respect the gods. Anyone else want to say anything?
George, go ahead.
Yeah, they're not atheists, but they don't, and certainly you see this in Socrates, they don't accept the mythological system that the Greeks, you know, at the time subscribed to, which is the official religion, right? I mean, what I would submit very quickly is that, you know, what sets ancient Greece aside in terms of its philosophy, in terms of the broader importance, is the notion of secular reason, right? The idea that even the naturalists, right, are not going to look to the gods to explain natural phenomena. I mean, one thing I want to mention very quickly is that, you know, one of the issues that the Greeks benefit from in terms of their philosophizing, right, is that the Mediterranean is this very active area of trade, and a lot of different civilizations colonize and, you know, thrive along the Mediterranean. I would submit that the Greeks benefited a great deal from seeing the Egyptian pyramids, right? So when you look at the Egyptian pyramids, right, you realize the immense ability of man's reason to accomplish just amazing things. Of course, it's interesting because the pyramids were constructed under the guise of religion. But I submit that what the Greeks drew from that was the idea that, hey, if we apply our minds, absent religion, absent theology, we can accomplish great things. And so, yes, I agree with you, they're not atheists, but they are employing secular reason, right? Let's put God or the gods to the background. They're much closer to deists, I would submit, philosophically. So I just wanted to, you know, make that point in light of Greg's commentary, but thank you very much.
Okay, so this is another presentation of Socrates and Meletus, his main accuser here, and another artist made those. Okay, so let's go to the next one.
One comment, please, before you go on.
Of course.
It's worth, I think, comparing what Xenophon has to say about Socrates to Plato. And Xenophon also wrote an Apology of Plato.
Right. I actually read it.
and in it, he goes to great pains to demonstrate that Socrates, revered the gods in a traditional way. In his Anabasis, I know he asked Socrates, should he go on this, on this military adventure? Mm-hmm. And Socrates says, go to Delphi and ask Apollo. Yeah. So once again, there's Plato is giving us a picture of what he wants to say, and there are other takes on Socrates that are different.
Right. Yeah, but even Plato is not saying that. He is arguing here that he does revere the gods, but he actually there is another dialogue where he basically says that are the gods judges of piety, or morality, urethra, I think it's called, where it's because they themselves behave very immoral. So they're not good examples. They're not necessarily the judges. So they must go somewhere else into the understanding what moral is. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add about
I can try if you can survive my accent.
please? I shall go
Okay.
ahead, of course.
Okay, so I should have done a terrible thing, man of Athens, if when the commanders whom you chose to command me stationed me at Pithier or at Amphipolis and at Delium, I remained where they stationed me like anybody else and ran the risk of death. But when the gods saved me a station, as I believed and understood, with orders to spend my life in philosophy and in examining myself and others, then I were to desert my post through fear of death and anything else whatsoever. If you should say to me in reply to this, Socrates, this time we will not do as Anytus says, but we will let you go on this condition. However, that you no longer spend your time in this investigation or in philosophy, and if you are caught doing so again, you shall die. If you should let me go on this condition, which I have mentioned, I should say to you, men of Athens, I respect and love you, but I shall obey the God rather than you. And while I live and am able to continue, I shall never give up philosophy or stop exhorting you and pointing out the truth to any one of you whom I meet.
Okay, so that he basically states his position and explaining that that he actually leads the virtuous life, and he cannot change anything, not as a pressure from the court or anything. He cannot uh, change his ways, similar way, because it's his duty to examine life, and that he brings a lot of positive things to the society as a result of it. And he shows that, like, he fought, he actually fought a number of the battles. So the famous Battle of Pithier, we actually know some of these battles and discussions about in the symposium. So the Battle of Pithier was fought, by the way, in the winter of 432 or 31, between 32 and 31. That's the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. That's where he fought, and it's actually lasted for almost a year. And the Battle of Delium was fought in November of 424, and it was like actually shortly after the Amphipolis fell to Spartans without a battle. And by the way, and the Battle of the Amphipolis that he's referring to is there were a few of them, by the way, but that was in 421.
Greg.
Yeah.
I have a question. I wondered if anybody has the answer. When he says, the God gave me a station, and then later he says, I shall obey the God rather than you. Who is the God? He seems to be referring one as, and he clearly likes the oracle. Apollo. So is this Apollo or Zeus or?
No, it's a Zeus. Zeus is the main god. He gave him a station to be a philosopher. It's like his general gave him a station to be at this place and defend. And he was given by the god. It's his nature. He's destined to be, and he's going to stay in this station till the last breath.
Then it's a little curious that when he's accused of not believing in the Athenian gods, he doesn't just say, yes, I believe in Zeus. He seems to believe in Zeus, but he never says that, I believe in the gods.
Well, yeah, maybe not in a certain way, but to me, from everything I read, okay, he does not deny the God. He does believe. I mean, their place and whether people interpret them correctly or just think that because he raised the question, what is the morality? Is the morality the good is because God love it, or God love it because it's good? I mean, that's the main question, So basically, he's just saying that the people have responsibilities also to examine. God do not decide everything. It's not that he doesn't believe in God. He does believe in God. He's just saying that we also have a responsibility to examine life and understand virtue and justice. Not necessarily because who can tell what the God decides? I mean,
Greg,
God
but
don't speak directly.
Greg, I'm sorry, but I think the wonderful thing about the Greek gods is they are all corrupted. I mean, they are not, they're very human. They do wrong things, they do right things, they do things because they feel like it. So they're not, God like we talk about God today. So I think when he talks about God here is that, he lived 70 years, 71 years teaching something. He's not going to give up his teaching and regate all the things that he said all his life. I mean, that's...
They're talking about...
God.
Okay, so who wants to say something? Somebody started?
Yeah, Greg, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
I felt like he refers to his belief and obligation to Zeus and to the gods generally quite a bit throughout this. And he sort of refers back to his commitment to what he learned from Delphi, that he's basically, he feels obligated to God to continue to ask these questions, to find out about wisdom and who's wise. And, he refers to it later as being the gadfly on this civilization, and that right. The gods sent him there as this gadfly, and that he was God's, literally he says, I was God's gift to you as this gadfly. So I think he refers to his belief in God almost entirely throughout this, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree. I also think so. And he is, yeah. But also this statement, it just shows his character, that he is, that there are some principles. He's not going to abandon it, even under the death sentence. Anyone else wants to say anything, add anything? I don't see your hands, by the way, so you just go ahead and start talking. I mean, I don't have.
I may suggest a contrarian point of view. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether he believed in gods, in Zeus or anybody else in particular altogether. And the reason I'm saying this, he's very skeptical type of mind. I can't imagine he wouldn't be able to see contradictions between described God's behavior and their human-like features and so on. So, and also my main point probably would be when I was listening to this, after Apology, there is another piece, I forgot how it's titled, but it's his conversation with his friend and the student who came to allow him to escape from the prison where he awaits his punishment. Mm-hmm. And then, and during this description, during that conversation, he describes Athens and his choice to live in the city and obedience to its laws and so on. From the whole context there, you see a person who devotes to the current state of things, the state that he chose to follow and to abide. And I don't think gods in any roles are present there. So again, obviously in this apology, in this court, he cannot say that, no, I don't believe in gods. It would be just simple suicidal and would be, though he shows that he doesn't value his life more than his honor, that would be just simple and primitive for Socrates to say, I don't believe in God. And he might believe in his own sense, but it's not just a primitive belief in gods. He probably, I would say, he believes in a state of things and current status. And maybe, again, I'm just trying to put my words in his kind of
No,
Didn't-
his mouth.
didn't-
I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
so
I mean,
Didn't
I personally
didn't Socrates in some places talk about his demon? He talked about having essentially a personal demon who spoke with him in his mind.
Mhm.
And I think that's the God that he's talking about. That's the God that he had a personal relationship with, his demon, D-A-E-M-O-N.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, let's go to the next one. Are there any takers to read it? Okay, I'll read this one. No, now you really talk about he knows what's coming. Know that if you kill me, I, being such a man as I say I am, you will know, you will not injure me so much as yourself. But neither Meletus nor Anytus, this another accuser, could injure me. That would be impossible, for I believe it is not permissible by divine law that a better man be injured by a worse. He might, however, perhaps kill me or banish me or disenfranchise me, and perhaps he thinks he would thus inflict greater injuries upon me, and the others may think so, but I do not. I think he does himself a much greater injury by doing what he is doing now, killing a man unjustly. And so, men of Athens, I am now making my defense, not for my own sake, as one might imagine, but by far more for you, that you may not, by condemning me, err in your treatment of the gift the God gave you. For if you put me to death, you will not easily find another who, to use rather absurd figure, attaches himself to the city as a gadfly to a horse, which, though large and well-bred, is sluggish on account of his age and needs to be aroused by stinging. I think that God fastened me upon the city in some such capacity, and I go about arousing and urging and reproaching each one of you, constantly alighting upon you everywhere in the whole day long. So I, yeah, I think that this is pretty impassioned speech and very interesting because he's basically saying that he's doing a great service to the city by being someone like a gadfly to a horse by really bringing attention, examining things, and arousing ideas. Um, so here, by the way, even though officially Stoicism is not started also, but there is a one of the tenets of Socratic philosophy. So it's kind of in a fashion of Stoicism. It is better to suffer injustice than to do injustice, because in doing injustice, you injure your soul and bringing contempt of the gods upon yourself. But in suffering injustice, you bear only material loss, not spiritual. Because he is saying that by killing him, they're doing injustice. So they are actually, in the eyes of God, they condemn themselves. So also, he is. So what else do I have here? If Athenian put Socrates to death, then they're harming themselves. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Socrates, as an honest man, would not have survived a political career, but he deserves a reward for his life he had led and for his service to the Athenians. That's basically what he is saying, that he rather, instead of being condemned, he actually deserves a reward because he is doing a service to the city. That's what this, I understand this sentence. So anyone who wants to add anything? Uh, anyone needs to unmute themselves if they want to talk?
Greg, I think that he's not saying that if they kill him, the gods will punish the unjust people who kill him, but that they're really killing the possibility of having someone who will question, who will try to find answers. I mean, he is someone who can help bring questions to people. So they will be injuring themselves, not because the gods will punish them, but because they will not have they will lose the opportunity of having someone like him.
No, he actually saying both. I mean, what you said is right, but he also saying that by killing him, they doing injustice, specifically
Right.
Meletus and Anytus, and he's basically had by doing this killing. Yeah, it says I think he does himself, and he's talking about accusers, a much greater injury by doing what he's doing now, killing a man unjustly. That's the injury, because you damage your soul by creating an injustice. By participating in the injustice, you damage your soul. So that's how you basically doing harm to yourself. Not only he is doing harm to the city by removing this worthy citizen who questions, but they do harm to their own soul because they're committing injustice. That's what they're saying.
I see. Yeah,
guess
yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right.
I guess I'm not entirely sure, Greg. I think I might agree a bit with he doesn't actually say you're doing harm to your own soul. He said that you may not, by condemning me, err in your treatment of the gift that the God gave you. Now, I think he is the gift that God gave to Athens.
Yes.
I think he refers to that somewhere else. For if you put me to death, I'm not sure I read the other thing as damaging their soul. It doesn't really say that.
He doesn't say about the damaging the soul, interpret, but there is a phrase here, and I'm quoting. It says, I think he does himself a much greater injury by doing what he's doing now, killing a man unjustly. He means Meletus and Anytus, that they do injury to themselves. He makes 2 points in this statement. One is that they're doing damage to the city by killing him because they're taking away this person. And the other one, they're doing damage to themselves personally by doing injustice. Because he accusing them of their motives to prosecute him for the personal interest. They're doing it knowingly. They know what they accuse him, he believes they're just doing it for like maybe fame, maybe power, but not for justice. They know they're committing injustice, and therefore they tarnish their soul. I mean, that's he's not saying about the soul specifically, but that's the interpretation. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let's go to the next one. Second, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Rolf, would you do me an honor reading it? This
Sure.
one.
Sure. I, men of Athens, never held any other office in the state, but served in the boule. And it happened that my tribe held the Prytaneia when you had wished to judge collectively, not severally, the 10 generals who had failed to gather up the slain after the naval battle. This was illegal, as you all agreed afterwards. But at that time, I was the only one of the Prytaneis who opposed doing anything contrary to the laws. And although the orators were ready to impeach and arrest me, and though you urged them with shouts to do so, I thought I must run the risk to the end with law and justice on my side, rather than join with you when your wishes were unjust, through fear of imprisonment or death.
Okay, and here I thought it was pretty interesting. He's just telling the story that early on, we're talking about like maybe 7 years ago, he's trying, you know, boule is one of the mechanism by which justice is done. It's a council of 500. You know, ecclesia is the general gathering of all citizens, but boule is the office that elected. There are 10 tribes from the reforms of Cleisthenes, and 50 members of each tribe participate, but one tribe alternate and becomes the leading. And as a matter of fact, in his tribe, Antiochia, was selected to lead this trial in 406 BCE. And he himself, Socrates, was elected by lot to be epistate, which is the leader of the those. So he basically was like a speaker of the house in a way. He led the procedure. So the procedure was related. They were basically prosecuting the generals after the Battle of Argenso that took place in 406. So Athenian fleet defeated Spartan fleet, and in the face of the coming storm, they chose to pursue the fleet of Peloponnesian ships rather than collect bodies of those who died in battle or some survivors. So, and when those generals were brought to court, and the politician at the time named Calixenus proposed that they would, without any further debate, the assembly should vote on the guilt or innocence on the generals, and it was clear that at the time, by the mood of it, they would vote to condemn them. But Socrates refused to put this to the vote, saying it's unconstitutional. So there were a lot of threats towards him because the general public and all those members of Boulay were for doing it. But he said, no, I'm not going, and he was in charge in a way. And against the common opinion, he stood up to everyone because of for the principle. He is just basically trying to say that he's a man of principle. And this is another example how he stood, you know, by principle against, you know, this vote. Similarly, like he cannot change, you know, leave his post as a philosopher and in the service of the city. So, however, parliamentary maneuvering later on kind of undid this victory, and then eventually they had a short court proceeding, and eventually they did vote soon enough, and they found all 6 generals guilty, and they were all executed. And amongst them, Pericles the Younger, the son of Pericles, and his Pithier, was executed. He was one of the generals in that battle. So the Athenians soon came to regret their decision in the case of generals, and charges were brought against the principal instigators of those executions. So that's why he's bringing this, reminding the Athenians that they acted rashly, and committed injustice. And he was the one in the service of justice trying to stop them. So that's this is the the story he brings in his own defense. Anyone wants to add anything? Okay, this is another presentation of the Socrates defense. Okay, so this is the time, when his defense speech. This is basically the end of his defense speech, and he is now they come to the decision as to the his guilty or not. So as you recall, all the deliberation are taking place during those speeches. They all, making all kinds of comments aloud. It's a rowdy meeting, and now the vote takes place, and the vote is he is guilty. So now the next piece is after that vote. Now it is very interesting that what happens afterwards, if you recall, now the prosecutor obviously proposes the death sentence, and now Socrates have to propose his own sentence, and it's interesting what he does, because if you remember, it is important to propose something reasonable, something close to the center, rather than something a little extreme, because they can only choose between 2 propositions. Okay, so who can read this one? Any volunteers? Tad, can I ask you? I mean, it's a big one, and you're a good reader.
Greg, I can read it because I think I can see it, but Tad can read it much better.
Yeah, good.
The second speech after the vote of condemnation. I'm much more surprised by the number of votes for and against it, for I did not expect so small a majority, but a large one. Now it seems if only 30 votes had been cast the other way, I should have been acquitted. And so the man proposes the penalty of death. Well then, what shall I propose as an alternative? So if I must propose a penalty in accordance with my deserts, I propose maintenance in the Prytaneum. I'm convinced that I never wronged anyone. I'm certainly not going to wrong myself, and to save myself that I deserve anything bad, and to propose any penalty of that sort for myself. What penalty shall I propose? Imprisonment? And why should I live in a prison a slave to those who may be in authority? Or should I propose a fine with imprisonment until it's paid? But that's the same as what I have just now said, for I have no money to pay with. Shall I then propose exile as my penalty? Perhaps you would accept that. No, men of Athens, that certainly will not. They certainly will not. A fine life I should lead if I went away at my time of life, wandering from city to city and always being driven out. If I had money, I'd have proposed a fine as large as I could pay, for that would have done me no harm. But as it is, I have no money. Unless you're willing to impose a fine which I could pay, I might perhaps pay a mina of silver. So I propose that penalty. But Plato here, men of Athens, and Crito and Critobulus and Aristobulus tell me that tell me to propose a fine of 30 minas, saying they are sureties for it. So I propose a fine of that amount, and these men who are amply sufficient will be my sureties.
Okay. So from what he's saying about the 30, that's basically considering that the size of jury is 501, the vote was for 221 against and 284 the condemnation. And now he's basically what he is saying by proposing just a material, just a penalty, financial penalty, and even he's not able to pay, maybe somebody will pay for him, you know, against the death sentence. It seems very far removed. But in a way, he is kind of like a mocking jury, saying, "Well, listen, I don't deserve any penalty at all, but okay, all right, if you wish." I mean, he is not even trying to play into this game. He's basically knows what they're going to decide ahead of time, and that's why he's just proposing, because he considers he doesn't agree with the court. He considers himself not guilty, and he applies that little one. So in terms of the size, the monetary thing, 100 one mina is equal to 100 dramas, and it's about 431 gram of silver, about 15 ounces of silver. That's the sum that he proposed that he can pay, and maybe somebody could pay a little more to the court, but it still seems if his pupils will let up, still seems to be very far removed punishment from the death. So he basically knows that he's not even trying to escape it. That's how I understand. Anybody? Anyone wants to? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, he really sums up the absurdity of the situation. I mean, if the jury was, what did you say at first, Greg? Like 300 or 3,000 men?
No, the jury is 501.
501. Okay, so it's a
21
difference
against 280.
So it's a difference of 30, and these are his choices. And given the system where he could propose his own penalty, like obviously he doesn't want to subject himself to prison at that age, and he doesn't want to exile himself, and he doesn't have money. I mean, he really clearly points out the absurdity of the situation. And as he says, earlier, and I think later, and definitely in the other dialogues, he's not afraid of death. It's, to him, it doesn't seem worth being imprisoned to avoid it. So he really summarizes just how ridiculous this whole thing is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Anyone else?
Is he saying that if he pays that, I mean, if they accept that, he will continue teachings and talking, or not?
Of course, he continues. So he already said that's a given. That's his position given by the gods, and he is going to continue, of course. But it's really, it really doesn't matter at this point.
Okay.
They really want to get rid of him. He's got a bad reputation, and a lot of people really want him away.
Well, apparently, when you tell a bunch of people who are in powerful positions that they're not very wise, they get pissed off.
Yeah, they may not be necessarily the jurors or arbiters, so they may not be a powerful man in the jury. They could be mostly a regular man, But he basically says that he goes to all these people. Of course, he doesn't even try. He thinks that the whole accusation, the whole case is a joke, and he is not. He shows this great courage and character here. I mean, like. I really respect them so much by reading, by seeing how he is like, just that's who I am. and if you, I'm ready to die for it. That's my philosophy, and I stand by my principles and my philosophy. I mean, not everybody does that. we know, we know a lot of people bend, a lot of people refute, a lot of people try to mollify. No, he is just one way. And that's why, in my eyes, he has the greatest respect. So and anyone else wants to say anything?
Well, just in about that point, Greg, that you brought up about having such tremendous respect for him holding his ground, in that really comes shining through in Phaedo, which I know we're not covering tonight, but Phaedo, where basically he's facing his imminent death. He the way he stands up to it with such courage and conviction is I find it the most powerful of the dialogues.
As a matter of fact, I was thinking about going with that later on because of Phaedo is I know that's really what happened next and very important. We'll see. Maybe we'll make a date for that. So now his last speech after clearly they decided that he is joking with his monetary punishment, and they condemned him to death. He knows it is, and now here is this last part of the defense. It's like his speech afterwards. He knows that now he's condemned to death, and that's where he basically brings that that could be summed up as unexamined unexamined life is not worth living, and that's where it is really in this later part when he already talks about life and death. Um, okay, anyone else wants to read this one? Okay. All right. If nobody else, I'll read it. Okay. I'll read this one. So the third speech, when death by drinking hemlock is chosen already. So you would have liked to hear me wailing and lamenting and doing and saying many things which are, as I maintain, unworthy of me. Such things as you are accustomed to hear from others, but I did not think at the time that I ought, on account of danger I was in, to do anything unworthy of a free man, nor do I now repent of having made my defense as I did, but I much prefer to die after such defense than to live after a defense of the other sort. For if man, when he reaches the other world, after living behind these who claim to be judges, shall find those who are really judges, who are set to sit in judgment there, Minos and Rhamananthus and Asaeus and all other demigods who were just men in their lives, would the a change of habitation be undesirable? Or again, that would be any of you, what any of you would give to meet with Orpheus and Musaeus and Hesiod and Homer? I'm willing to die many times over if these things are true, for I personally should find the life there wonderful when I meet Palamedes or Ajax, son of Telamon, or any other man of old who lost their lives through an unjust judgment. So that's the famous, and as a matter of fact, this is the part where they go. Let me just read a little more, another um, small, another sentence here, which is on the next one, which is, however, I make this request of them, when my sons grow up, gentlemen, punish them by troubling them as I have troubled you. If they seem to you to care for money or anything else more than a virtue, and if they think they amount to something when they do not, rebuke them as I have rebuked. So that's his final speech. And I said, rebuke you them as I rebuke you, because they do not care for what they ought and think they amount to something when they are not worth nothing. If you do this, both I and my sons shall have received a just treatment from you. So he basically asks that someone who should carry on his purpose, and someone would treat uh, his sons the way he treated the man of Athens. So he's basically saying it is better to die as a just person than to live as an unjust one. And the fear of death is basically say is unwise, as it involves thinking that we know what we do not. Death must not be a bad thing for Socrates, as a virtuous and rational life has led him to the live. So a few remarks about people he mentioned. Minos is a semi-mythical king of Crete, as you know, who is the son of Europa and Zeus. And Rhadamanthus is one of his sons. Athens was the king of Aegina, or Aegina, which is an island south of Salamis. And Athens is the grandfather of Achilles, father of Peleus. And of course, you know, Orpheus is a mythical inventor of music and the founder of Orphic mysteries. And Musaeus is also his disciple of Orpheus, and composed music and poetry and presided over the cult of Demeter and Ulysses. So these are the, his final words, accepting the death and basically saying, again, I did not put this particular phrase, but it's in this part of his Apologia, and basically to sum it on is that this famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So that's basically it. We came to the end of it, and I hope it brought some more kind of appreciation of what Socrates was, and about the life and justice system in Athens at this time around 399 BCE. So, and anyone wants to comment on this last fragment or on the whole dialogue in general? Please go ahead. I think I should stop sharing at this point. Oh, well, let me see. I still have this less famous paintings for you to look at when you talk. This is what happens in Plato when his disciples come before he takes the hemlock to drink, and they try to talk him out of it. But hopefully we'll discuss it at another time, another dialogue. I hope a lot of people, enough people would be interested. So any comments about last piece? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Greg, thank you very much. Giving this context was extremely helpful for me, and I think you did a great job. The last bit, which I think he sums up so nicely with the nen and a boo boo. You skip my favorite part, his prophecy, where he says, men on their deathbeds are supposed to be prophets. So let me tell you, my prophecy is basically that all the accusers are going to have 1,000 more accusers, and you can't just kill your accusers and have the accusations go away if you keep committing the crimes. Basically, he says if you continue to crush people the way you are, you'll have more accusers and more accusers and more accusers. And it's my favorite part. It's so well said, and particularly relevant to the way you described the times and what was happening with the oligarchs taking over Athens.
Yeah. So any comments, any questions about the society structure and the times? I try to bring, because it brings more understanding. There's three parts to your speech before the decisions of the guilt or not, and then his his suggestion of the punishment, and then after they chose that, then third part at the end. Um, so that kind of illustrates the justice system in Athens of those days.
Greg, thanks. Well done.
Greg, very good job, very detailed. You brought gave it another life, so to speak, and appreciate it. Just want to remind you guys, this week, Sunday.
Zach, I'm sorry. Before we go into this, I just want to make sure that maybe someone has questions or maybe has more to say about this before we conclude. I want to give an opportunity for anyone who.
I may add one more thing to what I already said. I believe this thing, by the way, I looked up, it's called this next piece by Plato called Creton. That's where he talks with his friend and student.
Well, it's one of them, but the
Right.
Phaedo is also the other one. I think Phaedo
Right.
is more important, I think.
Right, but what I wanted to say that I believe in that part, and I'm just relying on my memory. He says that if there is something there, then I'll see all these people, and he lists these people, wonderful people with whom he can have conversations and wonderful time and so on. And if there is nothing there, then it will be just like a sleep, which means that he definitely admits as one of the options that there is no gods and there is just nothing there, nothing after this earth life.
Yeah, from what I understand here, he is saying that he doesn't know, that maybe there is nothing, or maybe there is this, and I'll meet all these people.
Right.
That's what.
Exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
Right.
Paul particularly had an addition. He believed in God of Demon, right? Demon God, and he said he had a point. I guess Socrates had a point and said, if you don't believe in God of Demon, then it's almost like horse. When horse has an intercourse with another horse, and an ox comes out instead of the horse. It's almost something like that, where it's almost an unbelievable type of thing. You almost have to, if you believe in God, you believe in them, and that's his thing, was that he always had everything logic assumed to that, because if there is one God, then you should believe in all of them. And it's just that's his fact as well. I don't know if that piece was you guys particularly read, and I think Paul brought the point that was his belief in that. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I'm done.
Oh, sorry. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Greg. Yeah, I'm still curious about this question of what his belief was. I think, as Mikhail said, on the question of the afterlife, there he seems to be definitely agnostic. Consider, well, there might be an afterlife. There might be some sort of heaven, or whether it's an underworld or heaven. So he's open to that possibility. He's not purely atheist. But on the other hand, he clearly is a believer in some sort of divine beings or so on. I mean, you were suggesting that Zeus was sort of what made things happen and created him and gave him his function. Paul suggests that it might be his personal demon. And so I'm interested in looking at that further at some point, or if other people have comments on that, and just what Plato or what Socrates and Plato's religion was, because I've seen it argued, but that basically they were rationalists and just had no use for the gods, whereas in this one he seems to be appealing to, he seems to believe in the gods. He certainly believes in the Oracle of Delphi. So the argument that he's a pure rationalist does not seem entirely compatible with this piece. Thanks.
Yeah, and I don't think it's really realistic to expect anyone to be purely rational at that time. like as you said, or rather the agnostics, maybe they don't believe in everything. You know, but they did not come to the point of atheism. And he, in this piece, he specifically says that maybe there is nothing after this, which is fine too, or maybe there is this. Yeah.
Greg or Paul, maybe you can refresh or clarify the thing. I believe Aristotle didn't believe in gods.
You know, I don't know much about it. I find Aristotle very difficult to read, but I think you're right. But the comment I did want to make is that there is a trajectory. I mean,
right.
Was it safe to say you don't believe in God at the time? I mean,
No, it was not safe.
Apparently not.
Why you would say that you believe in God if it's not safe?
I'm not sure Aristotle proclaimed that he doesn't
probably
believe in
didn't
God. He was a
proclaim-
naturalist.
Right.
He studied nature, so he tried to explain things not purely by
Exactly.
God, but
by-
that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe, because pre-Socratics also were naturalists. You know, they developed this four major elements of the water, air, water, earth, and fire, and a lot of them believe that that's a basic elements that everything is made of. You know, but so that's definitely not the religious explanation. However, they were not necessarily denying that God
Right,
is
but just to finish my point. So if Aristotle, just assume for sake of argument, that if Aristotle didn't believe in God, was pure naturalist, and Socrates did believe in something, or was definitely probably agnostic, I agree with Ralph on this. And so Plato was somewhere in between. Plato being student of Socrates and Aristotle student of Plato. So this trajectory may be what really took place. Again, just for sake of argument.
But the main thing is that we could all try to interpret, there are specialists who interpret. I mean, there is no definitive interpretation, definitive knowledge that Aristotle was an atheist. So there are, but we really can't know. You know,
what I wanted to say about the trajectory is that you see that in the Hellenistic period, at least in highly educated circles, and right now once again I'm talking about Philo, and that to the Greeks, you know, in Alexandria, and we're talking just the early 1st century AD, they had kind of evolved this into a form of monotheism almost. That Zeus was seen as kind of a universal god, and furthermore, they were convinced that he had no physical form, and actually attacked the Jews for anthropomorphism in the Bible. So they attacked the Jews when the Bible said the hand of God or the foot of God. And they said, God has no hands, God has no feet. And Philo had to argue against that. So that's kind of where the Greeks were headed. And we know where how Plato was received later in the Neoplatonists. You know, this idea that there was you know, a kind of a divine pool that you came from and that you went back to, which then inspired Augustine and Christianity.
Right. And he himself probably got this idea from Pythagoras. You know, the idea, but because this really seems like it could be a connection to the Indian Hinduism, you know, or Buddhism, I know.
But this was really great, you know, as a change of pace. I mean, you know, a philosophical discussion instead of history. That was really like a, you know, a breath of fresh air. So thank you for that.
Paul, how was your walk?
It was one step,
Yeah.
one step into a chair. I'm not actually, you know, going to be competing in the marathon yet.
Okay. One small
long trips are with one step. I have to run.
It's like a Neil Armstrong
recovery,
in the moon, right? I mean, it's, you know, one step for
yeah.
Huge leap for recovery, yes.
I told the nurse, can I take a few steps around? She looked at me and she says, get in that chair.
All right. Yeah. Be careful though. Don't overdo it.
No, you're right. You're right. And she was right too.
We appreciate you calling too. I was even trying to follow up with you, and I didn't know, whether it was appropriate and inappropriate, maybe, because people might think that I'm trying to get you into the thing, but I just wanted to find out how you're feeling. That's all.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for the concerns.
Yeah.
And I am really feeling great, and I'm happy that I did this, and I'm looking forward to a complete recovery.
Right. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the prognosis are good, right? That you're gonna be restored mostly.
Well, I mean, I did this because I was having severe leg pain, and the leg pain was gone, 100% gone when I woke up from the surgery.
Oh, that's
so
good.
that tells you something.
Yeah. All right. Great. So, listen. I did my second shot yesterday, and
Good for you.
So soon I am like 2 weeks, and I'm gonna feel much much better. I mean, much safer. So
we can start arranging physical meetings, right?
And what's amazing is that I had no symptoms whatsoever after the second shot.
Yeah, I didn't either. Which shot did you get?
Pfizer.
Yeah, I got Moderna.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. Well, which is a good thing. I'm lucky, I guess. Because a lot of people had. I know, Mike, you had some. But
got my first shot today, Pfizer too.
Yeah, my wife.
First one, yeah.
My wife, on the first day, couldn't lift her arm past shoulder height. And then, but it was all over by the next day. She was fine. Right.
Okay, I'm just really looking forward to when we all gonna be like when it's gonna go away mostly. I just hope by the summer we'll have a lot of restrictions lifted, and hopefully things will get better. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, first drink is on me. We're going to the bar, guys.
Yeah. I haven't been for a year. I haven't been in a bar. Yeah, it's amazing.
You're already thinking like Socrates. If you forget about alcohol for whatever, the next thing you know, you'll be being like a Elon Musk.
Yeah, I practically stopped drinking. It's really amazing.
We have bad influence on you.
We've been out to a restaurant twice with friends, and it was like it didn't matter what we ate, just being face to face and talking. I mean, in fact, the second restaurant, the food was crappy, and it didn't matter at all.
Yeah. No, I'm really looking forward to going out and maybe traveling. Just really hope it will happen soon. Really tired of this, but yeah, we will at some point when things will get better, and maybe we'll return to. You remember, Zach? We used to have these dinners.
Yeah.
Right.
So we should do that. When everyone, like maybe in I don't know, couple of months, something, a month and a half.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
We have a lot of new members that want to visit.
Zach, have you been vaccinated?
First time today.
He's got first shot today.
Pfizer.
Yeah, because you're young.
Right. But now they lowered to 50 plus. I mean, you're not there yet, but still, it's it was faster than I thought it would be. I mean, I thought it's definitely month or two faster than I thought it would be. Definitely.
The whole vaccine was amazing,
Yeah.
Where did you get, Michael?
Moderna.
Where?
In my doctor's office.
Oh, I see. Because I went to Jackie Jarrett Center today.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about this politically is that Trump really does deserve some credit for making this investment in the vaccine, and he refused to take it. he had opportunities. Instead, all he would do was rave about how he won the election.
Well,
he-
but he finally, he was, at some point, he was vaccinated. I read about it.
Well, he was vaccinated, but I'm saying that he didn't try to make it into, an idea of look at my accomplishments.
Yeah.
You know, and it is a real accomplishment.
Yes.
Maybe the most important accomplishment of his presidency.
Oh, I thought he was vaccinated with a Clark Queen, no? Just kidding.
Anyway, we have to also give the current president the credit for rolling it out.
Absolutely,
faster
absolutely.
Than they
Let's
expected.
wait
I mean,
until
look
tax
at what's happening in Europe right now.
Yeah. I mean, he came in just in time.
And I spoke to some friends in Canada. They get nothing. The United States are not exporting any of it. And
Well, I thought we're sending AstraZeneca to Mexico and Canada.
But it's not up to us. It's a European thing. AstraZeneca.
No, we have a bunch of stockpiles.
We have some. We have several million.
I just was at the group, discussing literature from Toronto. They said that they don't have anything available right now. They're younger crowd, but still, I think they feel they're very much behind the United States.
Well, they just announced it, like a few days ago, so it'll take a
that's
while
right.
for it to happen.
Yeah, that's right. So our northern neighbors being left behind, really big time. It seems to be a bit unfair.
Yeah, well, fairness is a difficult thing to square with, the desire to take care of your family.
Well, I got you here, guys. Next one we're doing for literature is the Plutarch, right? Alcibiades.
Right.
Alcibiades.
So is Alex doing it?
Well, I don't know. I've been reaching out to him. I haven't heard anything, but I'll.
By the way, Alcibiades, also was a student of Socrates.
Yeah, sure. And that's another reason why they wanted him dead, because by that time they.
Alcibiades changed sides 3 or 4 times, and there was a reference in the end. I don't know if people caught that, to the 10 generals who were tried in a mass trial rather than being tried one at a time. So
the one that I said that. It was 10 of them to begin with, but only the 4 of them escaped. Only 6 of them were tried.
Right.
So was Alcibiades rumored to be a lover of Socrates, if I'm not missing something?
Well, in a Platonic sense.
Right.
I mean,
in Symposium, he looked like he was trying to. It looked like he was trying to seduce him, and Socrates, said rebuffed him. But apparently, what happened in the case of the 10 generals, is where the Spartans had become a major naval power because the Persians were pouring money at them, and Alcibiades had turned back to being an Athenian. He changed sides 3 or 4 times, and he advised the generals to avoid this combat. They went into it, and it was a disaster, and they didn't come back. It wasn't just taking bodies back; they were survivors. And they didn't try to pick them up. And they claimed that it was because of a huge storm that came up. And, who knows, maybe that was true. Maybe it really wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
But they essentially got lynched. I mean, kind of one of the messages always about Athenian democracy is that it's always susceptible to the emotions of the demos. Which some people would call the people, and others would say demos means the rabble, and they had demagogues, and they said, kill him, kill him, kill him, and that's what happened.
But as you said, Socrates was presiding over that process, and he is the one, at least, that stopped them at the first attempt.
Right. But then there was a second attempt, and they came back and overruled him. Right. And it was the demagogues.
Yeah.
Right. Probably the same people that were behind, executing Socrates.
Yeah. But you can imagine how those courts took place. it was like you would probably say something, people would scream insults, they would just like whoa, boo, like I can
Yeah.
imagine it was
You know,
going on like crazy.
Socrates said one thing that was interesting. He said he never held a position as a magistrate, but he was in the boule.
Right.
And I was taught that the way that you get that the boule was consisted of ex-magistrates. So
No, well, maybe, but not necessarily. They elected every year. They elected 50 members. All right, Rob, you gotta go. They elected 50 members from each tribe once a year. So everyone.
so it wasn't like an
would be
automatic.
chosen. No. Everyone would serve through their lifetime at least one or two times. You know, so it's they had to. Every year they change. It's not like you could stay. So so it's a 500 change every year. So you could imagine. Yeah, and it's good because they believe that that's how you raise the consciousness of the people, because they serve, you know, in a boule,
Well,
they get involved in so things, and almost every citizen serves at some point or another.
And it really was true, but you know, it was a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
You know, on the one hand, you had this tremendous civic involvement. You know, once again, I think about the United States. You know, have you read de Tocqueville?
No. He's
So
a philosopher.
he's a political science guy who
Right.
came to America in like the early 19th century. And what he concluded was that the essence of American democracy was not government, but it was all of the small institutions, clubs, sports clubs, drinking clubs, fraternal organizations. The fact that everybody participated in those things is what made what gave Americans a civil spirit. And you know, now that we have Facebook, you know, you don't have to work at you know, developing groups and showing up and all that sort of stuff. You just click a button and say, I like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
So when are you checking out, Paul?
Hmm?
When are you checking out?
Possibly tomorrow or Friday.
all right.
Well, good luck, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope.
And my oxycodone is kicking in, so I'm feeling happy.
Okay.
We could be more
Alright.
happy discussing our sobriety.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so yeah. Well, I'm glad we brought some you know, good time for you. I mean,
Greg was worried. Where's my best buddy here?
You flatter me. Thank you.
all right.
Okay, guys. Have a good night then.
You too.
Good night.
Take care. All right, guys. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.